y'all, so I'm going to be reading a no sleep Reddit story. It's called I Used to Work in a Hospital Until Something Strange Happened. So, I used to work the night shift at the hospital. There's a reason they call it the graveyard shift, but there's another story. I don't particularly like the place, but they pay well, so I can't complain too much about being the lucky guy who gets to clean up the operating rooms after an operation. At least I had some company. His name is Joe, and he's not very outgoing. I had to ask one of the other janitors to find out his name. He likes to keep to himself, and I've never heard him talk. He's a big guy, and he has the job of mopping the hallways. He does a good job, but that's mostly because he mops so slowly that he can't possibly miss a spot. Joe's a bit of an odd bird. He wears surgical gloves and mask along with a surgical hat and gown. Maybe he's paranoid about germs. The way this hospital is run, who could blame him? Even though he's not very social, it's good to have him around, especially at night when I'm cleaning up the bloody rags and sometimes pieces of botched surgeries that litter the operating room floors. Every once in a while, Joe could be called upon to take one of the bodies down to the morgue. And yes, the morgue is the creepiest place you could possibly imagine. Trust me, you never want to go to the morgue, especially at night. One of the things I learned early on is you never look at the bodies. Your imagination will take over every time, and you'll see something twitch underneath the sheet. That's why I stopped looking. When I had to deliver, I'd do it and get the hell out. Sounds, of course, you'll hear sounds. Once again, it's part of your imagination, but every once in a while, there's a twitch or two. And then there's the person who's not quite dead, but that also is another story. You could say I've seen a lot of things during my time here. Some of the most disconcerting is the bloody handprints on the wall. I've never figured out how they got there, but as per my job, I clean it up, punch out, and go home. Did I ever mention anything to the hospital? Nope. I discovered long ago that there are things they just don't want to hear about. So I clean it up, keep my mouth shut, and collect my paycheck. On this one evening, as I rolled my gurney back out of the morgue, my imagination made me think that I heard a thump, a loud, heavy thump. However, the more sensational side of me completely ignored it and kept on pushing the gurney at a slightly faster speed. Maybe, but nonetheless, I ignored it and went about cleaning the next OR. I became so involved in listening to my music that I never heard the doors of the room open and close again, or the footsteps approaching me until it was too late. I turned around and there was a corpse, lurching, arms outstretched, mouth open, 3 feet from me. I froze with fear. My mind shut down. This thing doesn't seem possible. I was too stunned to defend myself. The horrid stench that came from it was nearly enough to finish me off. It approached, teeth bared, inches away from its feast. My mind was paralyzed with fear and utter shock. And then my mind dropped farther into denial when Joe burst through the door lumbered over, grabbed the corpse, twisted his neck until I heard a sickening crunch, then threw it against the wall as if it were a rag doll. The corpse crumpled to the floor as Joe pulled off his mask to reveal a nightmare face of deadly pale skin and sinking cheeks. He seized the corpse and began chewing on its neck. He feasted on the core of the corpse as he ripped it to pieces. The corpse twitched only once and then ceased to struggle as Joe devoured it. A few minutes later, Joe stopped, allowed what was left of the body to fall to the floor, and looked straight at me. I've never seen that look in his eyes before. They were inhuman, fierce, and unnaturally hungry. He advanced, arms reaching towards me. Finally, I could see Joe's face up close. His skin was pale and rotting away like a corpse. His teeth were yellow and mostly gone. As he advanced, I realized how completely hopeless I was. I realized that my rescuer had become my doom, and I would soon share the same fate as the unrecognizable pile of horror that lay beside me. And then he stopped. The gaze lifted from his eyes. He looked at me, pulled his mask back over his face, and lumbered over the body. He grabbed one leg and dragged it out of the room, leaving a trail of blood and bloody parts. I sat there for a long time, trying to convince myself if it was a horrible nightmare, but every time I opened my eyes, the bloody splotch on the wall and the trail of blood were still there. I started mentally updating my resume, eventually finding the strength to get up and shakily walk across the room. When I stopped into the hallway, there was Joe, with his back to me, slowly mopping up the trail of blood that led back to the morgue as if it was another boring night. He looked back the hall at me for one moment, and then went right back to mopping. And that's the end of it.